So I want you to think about this kind of wild paradox for a second.
Okay.
Why is it that someone who is fighting for their sheer survival in a harsh wilderness...
Or like navigating the daily terror of a war zone.
Right, exactly. Why do those people often report a sudden, almost complete absence of depression?
Yeah, it's a crazy phenomenon.
But then, you can take someone else, place them in a perfectly climate-controlled suburban home, food delivered right to their door, infinite entertainment on a screen.
And they might struggle every single day with this overwhelming, paralyzing despair.
Exactly. It makes no sense on paper.
It really completely upends our standard definition of what a good life is supposed to look like. Because we're taught that the ultimate goal is to just eliminate all struggle. But when you actually look at human psychology, eliminating struggle doesn't create happiness, it just creates a vacuum.
Which brings us directly into the existential fog that we are tackling today. Because, if you're listening to this deep dive right now, you probably asked yourself the big, intimidating question at some point.
The classic, what is my life purpose?
Yes. And if you've ever tried researching that, you know it is just a nightmare of information overload. So today, we're cutting through all that noise.
We really are.
We are jumping into this extensive broadcast by educator A.J. Hoge, who dissects this exact paradox we just talked about.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to extract his framework for finding meaning in a modern world that honestly often feels super confusing and empty.
And we're going to look really closely at the actual mechanics of this. So we'll map out Hoge's 3 universal pillars of purpose.
But to get there, we kind of have to clear away the false idols first, right?
Exactly. We have to look at the societal default that most people just automatically substitute for purpose, which is, the endless pursuit of pleasure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because modern culture essentially operates on the premise that pleasure and happiness are the exact same thing.
Right. They treat them as synonyms.
Yeah. And Hoge traces this back heavily to the cultural shifts of the 1960s. That whole era really championed the philosophy of do whatever you want as long as it feels good.
Right. The whole free love, partying, totally unencumbered fun mentality.
Exactly. Sex, drugs, buying the newest car, partying every weekend. The messaging we constantly get from media is that a life of just purely selfish fun is the absolute peak of human existence.
But Hoge argues that treating pleasure as your life purpose is actually a massive trap.
A total dead end.
Yeah. If you look at the neurobiology of pure hedonism, it's entirely based on dopamine spikes.
Right. You buy the shoes, you get a rush.
You go to the party, you get a rush. But dopamine is fleeting by its very design. It metabolizes really quickly in the brain.
So when the music stops,
you inevitably crash. Yeah. Hoge points out that people who live exclusively for selfish fun for years, they eventually hit a wall. They end up with this profound, long-term emotional hangover.
Just characterized by deep emptiness.
Exactly, because the brain actually downregulates its dopamine receptors when you flood them constantly like that.
Oh, wow. So you literally numb yourself.
Yes. The things that used to bring you joy literally stop working.
To kind of illustrate the difference between just feeling good and actually having purpose, Hoge uses this really visceral analogy about running.
Oh, yeah, the 10K analogy. This is great.
Yeah. He says, imagine someone breaks into your house, points a weapon at you, and forces you to run 10 kilometers at gunpoint.
Terrifying.
Right. You are sweating, your muscles are screaming, your lungs are burning. It is pure, meaningless torture.
And your body's physiological response in that scenario is to just flood your system with cortisol and adrenaline. You are in a state of high-stress trauma.
But then, Hoge flips the scenario. Imagine running that exact same 10 kilometers, experiencing the exact same physical pain. But this time, you're training for the Camino de Santiago.
Right, the famous, month-long spiritual pilgrimage across Spain.
Exactly. In this second scenario, the pain transforms. You might actually find deep joy in the burning of your muscles.
Because the context changes everything.
Well, wait, I have to push back a little
Yeah.
here. Biologically, aren't we programmed to run away from pain? If I touch a hot stove, my nervous system doesn't say, hey, find the joy in this burn.
Right.
It says, pull your hand away immediately. So why would our brains actively reward us for a path that guarantees hardship, like a grueling 10K run?
Because human beings are meaning-making machines. That's the core of it.
Okay, explain that.
Well, the critical difference between the hot stove or the gunpoint run and the Camino de Santiago is agency and context.
Right, whether you chose it or not.
Exactly. When you lack agency, pain is just trauma. But when your brain recognizes that a struggle is voluntarily tied to a higher goal, it acts as an alchemist.
An alchemist, I like that.
Yeah, it literally takes the raw sensory input of muscle fatigue and reinterprets it. Instead of just sending distress signals, your brain starts releasing neurochemicals associated with satisfaction, resilience, and pride.
Like serotonin and endorphins.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The meaning doesn't eliminate the pain, it utilizes it.
So if the endless loop of pleasure is a neurochemical dead end, where do we actually look for this meaning?
Well, this is where Hody pivots to the first of his 3 universal pillars of purpose.
Right. He argues that before we can figure out what to do with our Tuesday afternoons, we have to look upward and outward. We have to seek what he calls the highest truth.
And this is where he gets into the origins of existence, which is a heavy topic.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back. He is highly critical of what he terms fake scientists.
Right. The ones who promote the idea that the universe, from the macroscopic scale of spiraling galaxies down to the microscopic complexity of a single leaf, was created entirely by random chance out of nothing.
He actually points out a massive contradiction with mainstream physics to make this argument.
Oh, the thermodynamics thing.
Yeah. We all learned the first law of thermodynamics in high school, right? Matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed.
They can only change forms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yet, the narrative surrounding the Big Bang often implies that all matter and energy just, exploded into existence from absolute, literal nothingness for absolutely no reason.
And Hody argues that accepting that everything from nothing narrative just breeds nihilism.
Right, because if it's all an accident, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. He says recognizing the deep, undeniable design and intelligence in nature is the first step out of the fog.
But we need to be really precise about his definitions here. Because when he talks about God, or the highest truth, he explicitly states he is not talking about submitting to some cartoon man with a beard in the sky.
Yeah, he finds that concept ridiculous, childish, and terribly limiting.
Totally. It's like treating the highest truth like a cartoon man in the sky is like looking at a cheap, faded postcard of a forest and thinking you've experienced the wilderness.
That's a great way to put it.
You're focusing on this crude, two-dimensional drawing and completely missing the vast, awe-inspiring reality of the actual ecosystem.
I think that captures his point perfectly. It's really about engagement with the mystery. Hody actually references the philosopher Alan Watts here.
Oh, I love Alan Watts. What did he say?
Watts proposed that the meaning of life is simply to ask the question, what is the meaning of life?
Wow.
Yeah, the act of seeking the highest truth is the purpose itself.
It's about taking a stance of awe.
Yeah.
Like when you drive out to the desert, far away from city lights, and you just look up at the Milky Way.
Experiencing that scale.
Yes. Experiencing that scale cures the modern disease of feeling small and disconnected. Because it shifts your focus entirely away from your own ego.
Exactly. Even if you consider yourself strictly agnostic, dedicating your mind to asking, why is there something rather than nothing, gives you a lifelong, profound mission.
It expands your mental horizon.
It does. But, as Hody acknowledges, you can't just stare at the night sky all day.
Right. Unfortunately, we all have bills to pay. We have to live in the physical world.
Which brings us down from the cosmos into the granular reality of our daily lives.
So, if the first pillar is the highest truth, the second pillar is about the invisible rules that govern our interactions down here on Earth. Hody calls this Dharma.
And Dharma translates roughly to natural law.
Right.
Hody compares these invisible laws to physical laws. Like if you hold a coffee cup at shoulder height and let go.
Gravity pulls it to the floor and it shatters.
Exactly. You can't see gravity, but the physical laws of the universe dictate the outcome without exception.
And Hody argues that just as there are physical laws, there are invisible laws for absolutely everything else in human existence.
He categorizes them into a few distinct buckets, which I think is really helpful.
Yeah, go ahead.
First, biological laws. If you lift heavy weights and eat protein, you build muscle. If you sit on a couch and eat junk food, you become weak.
Pretty straightforward.
Then, psychological laws. Certain thought patterns, like chronic gratitude, reliably create mental peace. Other patterns, like chronic resentment, reliably create misery.
And finally, social laws. There are unseen rules of human persuasion, empathy, and connection that dictate whether our relationships thrive or fail.
What's fascinating here is how these concepts show up historically.
Oh, so.
Well, Hoagie points to studying ancient texts, not as religious dogma, but as practical observation manuals.
Oh, like field guides for life.
Exactly. For example, the Bhagavad Gita, an ancient Indian epic, is essentially a deep dive into the concept of performing your duty without being attached to the outcome.
Right, doing the work for the sake of the work.
Yeah, or the Tao Te Ching, the foundational Chinese text, which teaches wu wei, or effortless action.
How to flow with the natural currents of the universe rather than fighting them.
Right. These texts were written by people who observed natural law over centuries and just wrote down the rules.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Let's say your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. and you just dread facing the day.
Yeah, we've all been there.
How do you know if you are actively violating one of these invisible natural laws or if you're just, having a tough week at work?
That's the million-dollar question. And the defining metric is chronic friction.
Chronic friction.
Yeah. Just like you would be utterly exhausted if you tried to run up a downward-moving escalator, going against Dharma burns your energy rapidly and yields absolutely no progress.
So if you are constantly exhausted, constantly hitting the exact same relational walls with your partner, or feeling a persistent baseline sense of despair,
you are likely violating a natural law.
makes sense.
Hoagie suggests that the purpose of life is to become a scientist of your own existence. You run life experiments.
You test different approaches, observe the results, and adjust until your actions produce harmony instead of friction.
Exactly. And the most visceral laboratory for testing that friction, the fastest way to abandon that selfish pleasure trap we talked about earlier, brings us to Hoagie's third pillar.
Right. We've gone from the macro scale of the universe to the daily laws of Dharma down to the immediate reality of other humans. The third pillar is family.
And Hoagie does not sugarcoat this pillar at all.
No, he really doesn't. He shares his very raw reality at the time of the broadcast. He had 2 newborn babies, and one of them was in the hospital.
It's incredibly stressful.
He describes being severely sleep-deprived, getting vomited on, and literally walking around with poop on his hands.
It is objectively grueling.
Definitely not the beautifully curated Instagram aesthetic of early parenthood.
Not at all. But he says he loves it.
Because the purpose is undeniable and monumental. These tiny humans literally rely on him for survival. If he doesn't show up, they die.
And this leads to Hoagie's ultimate non-negotiable rule for purpose. It must be bigger than just you.
Right. Because living a life focused entirely on the self, constantly asking, am I happy right now? Am I entertained right now? It forces you to obsess over minor inconveniences.
It really does. It makes a person feel isolated and fragile.
But having children, or deeply caring for an aging parent, or dedicating yourself to your extended family, it instantly obliterates that selfishness.
Because if we look at the psychological mechanics behind this, serving your family forces you to stop constantly analyzing your own emotional state.
Your ego has to take a back seat.
Exactly. The ego takes a backseat to survival and care. And the beautiful irony of this mechanism is that by serving others, by putting someone else's well-being above your own, you accidentally stumble into the deep, abiding joy that the hedonists from the 60s were desperately trying to find but never could.
The human brain rewards us for ensuring the survival of the tribe.
It does.
It's like living solely for yourself is like eating nothing but candy.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. It's incredibly sweet at first, and it requires zero effort to consume. But eventually, a diet of pure sugar makes you sick, weak, and malnourished.
You crash.
Yeah. You need the dense meat and vegetables of deep responsibility to actually feel full and energized.
That dietary analogy tracks perfectly with how our minds metabolize responsibility. And, this principle of finding meaning through necessary struggle isn't just confined to raising children.
Sure.
It manifests in extreme environments, and it dictates the quality of our professional lives, too.
Which brings us right back to that paradox we opened the show with.
Ah, yes.
Hoagie points out that people trapped in war zones, or those fighting for pure survival in the wilderness, often completely lose their baseline depression.
Their minds become sharp, hyper-focused, and strangely calm.
Because fighting to stay alive provides intense, immediate, undeniable purpose. Your brain literally doesn't have the spare bandwidth to worry about existential dread when you are just trying to find clean water.
Right. Conversely, easy, comfortable lives completely devoid of meaning are just breeding grounds for despair.
Because the human brain evolved to solve life or death problems.
Exactly. When you remove all external threats and provide total comfort without giving the brain a meaningful task, it turns inward and starts inventing internal problems.
And to illustrate his theory on the dangers of an easy but meaningless life, Hoagie actually cites American suicide statistics.
He does, yeah.
And we are purely reporting his theory here. But he notes that white Americans statistically possess more material wealth and live ostensibly easier lives on average than Black Americans, yet they have a significantly higher suicide rate.
Right. Hoagie's overarching theory here is that material comfort, when it completely lacks an accompanying sense of deep meaning or daily survival purpose, is incredibly dangerous to the human psyche.
It's the ultimate warning that comfort without purpose is toxic.
It really is.
And this dynamic bleeds right into our careers, too. In the source material, there's an anecdote from a listener who worked in a highly lucrative but incredibly toxic law firm.
Oh, I remember this one.
Yeah, they were earning fantastic money, winning cases, pleasing the boss. But the job drained every single ounce of their positive energy.
They had absolutely nothing left for their family or their partner at the end of the day.
But when they quit and switched to teaching English, a job with intense, direct human impact, and arguably less prestige and money, they came back to life.
They suddenly had energy again.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows how misaligned friction drains us, while aligned friction fuels us.
Right. The law firm was out of alignment with their dharma. It was likely serving ego and money over human connection.
Whereas teaching English aligned with the social law of helping others.
Exactly. Hoge actually uses a famous concept from Arnold Schwarzenegger regarding the gym to explain this mechanism.
Oh, the last rep theory?
Yeah. Schwarzenegger always said it's the last reps. The ones that cause your muscles to burn and shake, the ones that cause the most physical pain, those are the reps that actually build the muscle.
The easy reps don't change your body?
No pain, no gain.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Okay.
If the brain needs a struggle to find meaning, and comfort breeds despair, does this mean we actually need a crisis to find purpose?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right. Like, do we have to wait for a disaster to hit our lives?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there a way to artificially manufacture that survival friction while living in a comfortable suburb so we don't lose our edge?
You've hit on the most crucial part of designing a purposeful life right there. And the answer is no, you don't need a life-threatening crisis, but you do need to voluntarily take on heavy burdens.
You manufacture that friction yourself.
Exactly. By setting goals that push you past your current capabilities. You commit to writing a difficult book, you sign up to train for a marathon, you volunteer for a cause that forces you to confront suffering.
You have to actively choose the difficult, meaningful path.
You have to choose your last rep before the universe forces a tragedy upon you.
Voluntarily choosing your heavy burden. That is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is.
But we've covered an immense amount of ground today.
We definitely have.
We started by dismantling the hollow, sugary promise of the pleasure trap, and we unpacked Hoagie's 3 sturdy pillars of purpose.
Seeking the highest truth and acknowledging the grand design.
Experimenting with the invisible natural laws of Dharma.
And dedicating yourself to family or a cause that completely obliterates the selfish ego.
The overarching thing here is that purpose is not something you passively find. It is something you actively forge through resistance.
It is the true alchemy of turning necessary suffering into strength.
And if you're listening right now, I want to remind you that your purpose isn't something you have to wait to discover in the perfect career a decade down the line.
No, not at all.
You don't need a promotion, and you don't need to move to a monastery. You can start observing natural law today. You can look up at the stars tonight and ask the big questions. And you can shoulder a heavy burden for the people immediately around you right now.
To that end, let's make this incredibly practical. I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own.
Lay it on us.
Think about a recurring frustration or a persistent pain point you are experiencing in your life right now. Maybe it's a difficult project at work or a challenging dynamic with a family member.
We all have those.
We do. But instead of trying to escape it or numb it with cheap pleasure, what if you applied Arnold Schwarzenegger's last rep theory to it?
Oh, wow.
How might this exact frustration actually be an invisible natural law trying to teach you the specific purpose you've been looking for?
That completely flips the script on how we view the obstacles in our path.
It changes everything.
Suddenly, you aren't just wandering through an existential fog trying to avoid hitting a wall. The wall itself becomes the gym where you build your meaning.
The obstacle is the arrow,
pointing you exactly where you need to apply your effort. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us, and we'll catch you on the next one.